Preseason is upon us, so we're going to do a special episode of Warning Take Weekly with a mailbag because I haven't been able to do one lately, so we're going to have a good one right now. Hey, what's up, everybody? So today we're going to have the mailbag. We're going to have some preseason talk. Tonight is the 25th of September, so the Hurricanes will be playing their first preseason game tomorrow night with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And let's see here. Sorry that I have to keep looking at the screen here. I'm making sure the focus is staying in. I'm actually having to re-record this part. So I just want to talk about some stuff that we've got coming up here on the channel. First things first, the weekly show is going to go back to being weekly. At a very minimum, we will do the mailbag. I might not be able to get to every comment, but I will try. We'll do the mailbag, and we will talk about the previous games and the upcoming games for the week. And as I stated before, that show will be on either Friday or Saturday. I think it's more likely being Saturday, as I'm working my day job again on Fridays now. Additionally, I have 5 video projects in the works. One of them is the Alexander Nikishin video, and it's come a long way. There's a couple of other things that I want to get for it, but other than that, it's almost done. Everything is recorded except for a couple of segments of it, and I got to add some music into it, make sure all the audio levels are good, and send that one out. One thing I didn't like about my Sebastian Aho analysis was the audio levels were not exactly where I wanted them, so I'm trying to make sure I don't make that mistake with the video about Boom. I also have breakdown videos of Jalen Chatfield, Tony DAngelo, Jacob Slavin, Andrei Svechnikov, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi all in the works right now. So you'll start seeing those a little bit more frequently. I'm hoping to get at least one of those out every 2 weeks. So let's get into the mailbag. So our first one here is from Nicholas Stewart 526. He says, this was in response to the video I made about Martin Necas needing to reach his superstar potential. He says, I'm right here with you. I think Necas has the talent to get to that superstar potential. The only problem is, to me, is his brain. Dude just doesn't make the decisions he should in the moment. He second guesses himself. Excuse me. He second guesses himself almost, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I think he can be very good this year for sure. So, yeah, and I'll elaborate further on the reply I gave to you, and thank you for the comment, by the way. So, Martin Necas' problems, in my opinion, are 100% mental. I think that just sometimes his feet and his hands, but more so his feet, move faster than his brain does. And that's where he needs to mend the disconnect between his brain and with his body. Now, he did talk a little, I didn't get to watch all of it, but he did a 32 Thoughts episode with Elliot Friedman, and he talked about, you know, the whole mental health and the sports psychology thing and everything, and it seems like he's taken steps in that direction because, you know, I can only imagine, like, I get nervous playing beer league. I can only imagine, like, the pressure that these guys feel, especially when, you know, someone like Martin Necas, who is expected to be a player at times who makes an impact along the lines of, if not greater than Aho as far as the forwards go, a guy who has all the scoring potential in the world and is actually playing a position that I still think he feels unnatural in with being a winger as opposed to a center. That's why I'm hoping maybe this year Brind'Amour will maybe, you know, they need to keep the defense first mentality, but I'm hoping he'll loosen the reins on them just a little bit. Loosen the reins on them a little bit and let them, you know, play a little bit more of a freewheeling style offense, and Necas being at center could definitely help with that. And like I've stated before, I think the biggest thing holding Brind'Amour up from putting Necas at center is how quickly he tends to leave the zone, and maybe he leaves it just a split second too early. But then if you leave it a split second too early, you're opening up passing lanes, you're opening up the middle of the ice, you're opening up another scoring option for the opposing team. So I understand the reluctancy, but at this point, I don't think it can hurt to try, and I think it would be best to do so on home ice when they have last change, and he can be kind of insulated from making some mistakes if he's going to, but it needs to be given a good college try, and it needs to be done for more than a couple of games. So I would say, like, during a decent 2-3 game homestand or something like that, be a good time to take a look at it. Thank you very much for the comment. I've got another one from you too. You actually left me one like right when I was doing the show, so I'll make sure to get to that one too. Alrighty, so we got another nice long comment from one of my favorite repeat commenters here, Jersey Shawn. Good to see you back. So this comment right here is in response to another guy on here, Hexen GT, and in the comment section of one of the videos, I want to say it was the last time I actually did the weekly show, they were talking about, like, are the Hurricanes close? Does it happen this season? or they may be 1-2 years out, and I really like this response because it's kind of along the lines of what I'm thinking as well. Jersey Shawn says, I think the Canes are still 1-2 years out and maybe a few trades signings away. If you look back at the last 6 Cup winners, they all have a relatively common pattern. Either playoff disappointment that was preceded with President's Trophies, franchise best regular seasons, or not being able to get over a hump. The Caps had both of those, winning back-to-back President's Trophies and not being able to get out of the second round. St. Louis had a few decent playoff runs but could never get it done. Tampa constantly had deep runs, and of course famously that President's Trophy season before being swept in round 1. Colorado and Vegas were essentially the same too. It seems to be a psychological factor, whether it be the pressure and expectation because all of those teams won seemingly when most expectations were off or people counted them out, or maybe they did not pace themselves in the regular season thinking that their work was done after doing so well before the playoffs. So that's actually an incredible point right there, particularly with the Hurricanes, with the way they play. I'm wondering if maybe that's why they have such along with the fact that, we don't have an AHL team right now, I'm wondering if that's why they signed so many extra guys, is because they realize that they play a very arduous, albeit effective, they play an arduous style of hockey, and rotating guys out so that they only play 78, 79 games as opposed to 82, especially your core players right before the postseason starts. I'm wondering if maybe that's a factor why they have 9 defensemen, and that's not even counting the ones that are on PTOs. So that's a really good point, actually. I have thought about that because it's like, I noticed it not this season, but last season when they got eliminated by the Rangers. By Game 3, I remember there were times where it just looked like Aho in particular was exhausted, and he plays hard as it is, and he buys into the system and plays even harder. Carolina is in the same boat. And I don't think with the expectation of both the fan base and the national media, they will get it done. Preseason odds have them second overall to win. I can see them easily winning the President's Trophy this year and underperforming in the playoffs and drawing a lot of controversy, just like every other recent Cup winner. However, it seems like this may be a formula for success and a pattern we see before a team gets it done. Bottom line, we never know, and it's fun to speculate. It is. That's part of the reason I started doing this channel. It's fun to speculate about. And at the end of the day, if we end up being wrong, it's totally inconsequential. I mean, do I get upset if they lose? Absolutely. Did I get really upset when they lost to the Panthers in the manner that they did? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it did nothing more than put me in a bad mood. It didn't affect my life at all. I wish people would kind of look at sports like that. Like, yeah, be mad about it for a little bit, but, if you wake up in the morning, you're healthy, and everyone you care about is healthy, it ain't that big of a deal. I played all the way up to college, and I saw your other comment about that too. I played all the way up to college hockey, and I can tell you from experience it's much easier to play as an underdog than it is to play as a favorite. Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why 2019 was, so much fun. If you're a favorite, you're more stiff and afraid of making mistakes, and you try to play perfectly, which means every mistake you make sticks in your brain for a lot longer and wears down on you. As an underdog, you have the nothing left to lose mentality and play all right, let me switch over to the second half. Play your heart out, and you can seemingly focus better as well. Just some food for thought, especially considering what we saw happen to Boston this last season. Yeah, here's where I made a lot of people mad. I didn't see them losing in the first round, but I thought they were going to sizzle out at some point or another because their regular season schedule was super easy. It was very travel-friendly and everything like that. For example, the first time the Hurricanes played them in the 3 games that they played them this year, it's like Boston, I think, was at home for 12 of their first 14 games. They got a good foundation, and then they just stacked hay on top of it, and then they just kept playing, and they rode that momentum, and then they got to the end, and they had to play against the same team 7 times in a row, and they exposed everything that they were weak with. And that's one of the things that, to your point of what you were talking about before, that makes the playoffs such a crazy different dynamic, is the fact that you're playing the same teams over and over and over again. And at that point, it becomes as much of a mind game of you trying to figure out ways to beat them that you weren't having time to figure out before. But then you're 3 games into a series, and you're starting to find ways to pick off their passing lanes. You're starting to find ways to shut down their transition. You're starting to find ways to shut down their power play and make yours more effective. Your goalies start figuring out when they need to be more aggressive or maybe stay back in the net, when they need to come out and play the puck. Stuff like that. Player-wise, sometimes it just helps to acquire a depth bottom 6 guy or 2 at the deadline. They don't always have to be a superstar. Tampa did it in 2020, and it worked out really well for them. Sometimes it helps to freshen up the locker room. So, yeah, I agree with that. It's as far as core pieces, the Hurricanes have everything they need. I would like for them to add some, a lethal right-handed sniper. But at the same time, though, they went as far as they did last season without Svechnikov, and that kind of goes back to what you're talking about with expectations as well. When Svechnikov came out of the lineup when he got hurt, whoever favored us to win at that point they were just all kind of like, well, they don't have Svechnikov, they don't have Pacioretty. People who actually follow hockey that remembered Kasha, they were like, they don't have him either. They already have struggles scoring, like they were glaring struggles scoring, and lo and behold, they exceeded expectations of almost everybody despite the injuries. So there's definitely a degree of truth to what you're saying there. Furthermore, their ability to win this year could be all about matchups as well. Lots of upcoming young talent in Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, and the East. So theoretically, if you can make it back to the second round or East final and play a team with little playoff experience, that could help as well. Sort of like New Jersey was in the playoffs this year. If Carolina is the last team standing with playoff experience, that could pave the way. I don't really see them being able to get it done with other powerhouses, though. They might be able to make it close, but I don't see them getting it done. So yeah, I'm kind of as unfortunate as when Hexen asked me that question, I definitely that was kind of like where my mentality about it was. It's like they're close. I do believe they're close. You could narrow it down to 6 teams in the National Hockey League right now and give them all equal odds to win the Cup, in my opinion, maybe 8. And Carolina, either way, would be one of those teams. But just saying that, this is it, I mean, I said this is it last year. I kept it to myself. I remember I went to the home opener, and Anderson stepped out. Stepan came out right after him. And then I look back over at the tunnel, and then Burnsy comes out, and I look back. I took a video of it. It's actually on the channel, and I remember saying to myself, and I didn't say it again until after they beat the Devils in the playoffs because I was at that game too. I remember saying, okay, this team is different. This team is special. They're going to do it. And I remember texting my dad after that game, and I said, this team is special. That's all I'm going to say, and I didn't bring it up again. And then I got disappointed by the Braves a few days later. But I definitely think it's possible for them to win, but this is definitely not one of those seasons where I think that it is definitively going to happen. I don't think I'll ever definitively think it's going to happen again after what happened last year. That's part of the reason I was so disappointed, because I saw them beat the Devils. I saw them win a series in 5 games where they practically dismantled them, and I expected it to go to 7. Not to mention the one game that the Devils did win, the Hurricanes had Jordan Martin get a goal on a penalty shot and 2 shorthanded goals. So that was one of those games, in my opinion, the Devils, in my opinion, when they lost Game 3, the Devils didn't win. The Hurricanes just played like garbage and they lost, if that makes any sense. Jersey Shawn, thank you very much again. I think I got another one in here from you. I'll get to it in a little bit. So speaking of Hex and GT, here he is. Thank you for the comment again, bud. He says, appreciate you diving into everyone's comments. You're welcome. For some of us new fans, how about a video that covers 5 early games you need to watch to understand the team's identity? So yeah, I thought about this right here, and I think that I can come up with 5 of them for about 3 different eras. I was thinking ones leading up to the 2002 Stanley Cup run where they lost to Detroit in the finals, the actual 06 Cup run, and then the ones leading up to them ending the playoff drought. I think that there's a bunch of them there that could definitely be looked at. So I could make 2 or 3 videos in regards to that topic, yes, and that's on the list now that I've got written down right here. Because I keep a bunch of notes right here. That's why you'll see me glance away from the screen occasionally and everything like that. I have that in the notes. We'll definitely make something like that. I think that's going to be more off-season or maybe Christmas break, All-Star break type of content, but I can definitely get that done. Thank you very much for the suggestion. I will do that. All right, so we got a new commenter here who I think had 2 or 3 of them, actually. D. Ely, 9268. Chatty over TDA 100%. That was in response to my video about what the Hurricanes need from DAngelo coming up this season. And I told him video about him after one about KK, and I published that one earlier today. Dude, don't make me choose. I love both of them. They both bring different things to the table. Like, if you could, combine them like a little Transformer or like a Voltron robot or something like that, you have, the greatest, top 4 right-handed defenseman you could ask for. Both of them, Tony brings you that dynamic offense. They both bring you toughness. Chatfield brings you that really aggressive gap control, good poke checking ability. Or if I had to pick which one is more well-rounded, Chatfield gets that 10 times out of 10. As far as someone who's going to generate some offense when you need it, when you're down by 1 and you got a minute left, I'm taking Tony in that situation. They're both tough. They'll both fight. They both hit. But as far as like overall, if I had to choose between the two, and y'all know how big of a Tony DAngelo fan I am, I'm taking Chatty 10 times out of 10. I love both those guys. I think even though they're both right-handed, there's the potential for them to play on the same pair. I'll get to that with Nicholas Stewart's other comment here in a little bit. I definitely feel you on that. If I had to make a choice between the two, and if it had nothing to do with money, terms, salary cap, nothing like that, I'm taking Chatfield. Dog's being crazy. All right, and I got a couple more from you here, but thank you very much for the first comment. All right, Rosario Canistario. If I ever pronounce that wrong or right, let me know, please. 3561. He says, I mean, let's be honest about the first. This is also in response to DAngelo, man. He generates a lot of discussions wherever he goes, even when he doesn't say anything. I mean, let's be honest about the first time Aho broke his ankles, Headhunter Truba, his partner, coughed it up on the boards by the blue line, and then stood there and went for a hot dog and a beer while Aho was bearing down at full speed and TDA was flat-footed. That's exactly what happened. Truba, like people say Tony DAngelo is a traffic cone. In that particular instance, Jake Truba was very much of a traffic cone. And he also says Barry, Burns, Fox, etc., all offensive D who are not defensive stalwarts, and expecting them to be is pointless. So I agree with that. Adam Fox, I think, is a little bit above average on the, defensive side of things. And when I say that, I mean it's like there's this belief, and there's this pretty wide belief that offensive defensemen and puck movers, guys like that they automatically don't have defensive competency. Is Fox, as good as Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, Adam Pellick, or Josh Morrissey? Absolutely not. But I would say as far as the archetype of that type of defenseman, his defensive acumen is definitely on the higher end of that. Barry, Burns, absolutely, but that's the cool thing about having guys like Slavin, Pesce, and everything like that. You can have those puck movers, and they have their safety valve with them, and this is what the league wanted. So you bring up an excellent point with that, and now, barring talking about the 80s, because I feel like that you can't really compare it to this era now just because the rules are so different, the gear is different, everything is different. One of the things that I think that can be taken into consideration with this, the league kind of wanted it like this because, they, in the post-lockout era, they were saying they wanted it to be higher scoring, faster paced, more exciting of a game. Most of the changes that they made, I think, were good. The trapezoid, that's going to get its own episode, and I'm bringing a couple of my goalie buddies on to talk about it just because when it comes to goalie things, I always consult outside with it because I don't know I never played goalie, so I don't know. I at least, I feel like I have some idea of what I'm talking about when it comes to guys who skate out, but I would like to get the opinion of somebody who's actually seen it from that perspective and everything. But I would say that having 3 out of your 6 defensemen on any given night, sometimes more, basically act as a fourth forward to generate offense, and it's like, okay, you go into a zone 2-on-2, and then you have another defenseman who jumped in there because he made a poke check because he forced a turnover somewhere in the neutral zone, and he has a chance to take off with a full head of steam and join the rush and everything like that to generate more offense because it's much more of a high-risk, high-reward game now than it used to be. Like one of the things that I do at my day job, I have NHL Network pulled up there. When I see games from right before the lockout and when I see games like shortly after it when they were still kind of getting out of that, when they were still kind of moving towards that faster-paced game, more than anything, it looks like if you compare the game from back then to now, it looks like they're skating through quicksand. It looks like they're skating through mud. Whereas now the pace of it is just absolutely unreal. So I definitely think that part of the reason why the puck-moving defenseman became so prominent in this era, it's the only way you can consistently win. Defensemen now, it's essentially 4 forwards and a 5th guy who can skate backwards pretty well in a lot of cases. Yeah, this is definitely what they went towards. Now, for example, and I think that's the way that they're teaching the game now, because I remember I had a beer league game the other night, and I'm walking in there, and they're doing the juniors are doing practice or tryouts or something like that, and every time one of the defensemen regained possession of the puck, he didn't really look up and scan for a pass and backpedal into a better position to find some open ice. He just took it and went. And then if he did distribute it, he usually did so at the blue line, in the rush, or they would coil back to the point and one of the forwards that covered up for them would come back in. It looked completely different than the way that I was taught to play, what little bit I did get to play growing up. The way I was taught to play defense was you get possession of the puck in the neutral zone, or if you're going to skate it out and everything like that, the first thing you do is pick your head up, make sure your head's up. I learned that lesson the hard way, and scan around, find a passing option, send it to them, and then you go from there. But there wasn't all this crazy stuff like constantly seeing odd man rushes because of defensemen jumping in and everything like that. That's a now thing, and it's here to stay. So you definitely do need that defenseman that acts as a fourth forward, just like your center acts as a third defenseman. And the center acting as a third defenseman is an element of the game that's as old as the game itself. Rosario, thank you very much again for the comment. I think I've got another one in here from you. I don't know. I've got a bunch of them in here, but I clipped all of them except for a couple of them that were clearly troll comments. I ain't going to waste my time. All right, so we got my response to you out there. So there's my response to you, Rosario, and then Dealey 9268. That wasn't the only time Aho made him look silly. I'm like, now he makes him look as silly probably every day at practice. Rosario replies again, yeah, they definitely do. There's tons of offensive D. In the league, I'd trust far less than Tony DAngelo. Dursey, Barry, Carlson all make my ass pucker every time they touch the puck, and all of them are soft as hell. At least Tony will hit and try and match people and try to actually defend. Yeah, when Tony gets burned, he at least hustles his ass back, and he tries to get a stick in there or lay the body on somebody. So Erik Karlsson's defensive issues are not 110% his fault. He basically had half of his ankle bone. They took out half of his ankle bone or something like that. He had a surgery not nearly as severe as the one Joni Pickinen had, but it was kind of similar if I remember correctly. And that's part of the reason that he has a hard time pivoting backwards and getting into position. It's not entirely his fault. Now, was he ever the most stalwart defender? Absolutely not. But now it's he's got a lot working against him. I think that, hot take, unpopular opinion, but I gotta stick to my guns on this. I think Jacob Slavin would have a harder time covering up for Erik Karlsson if he were his partner than when he's been with DAngelo, Hamilton, and even Burnsy now. And I think people are a little too down on Burnsy. I think he's better defensively than a lot of people give him credit for. And especially when he can play a zero hesitation game with having Slavin on his left. So, guys, thank you very much for those comments. I'll get to some more of them here. All right, so now we have SimRacer Steve 82. That's really cool. By the way, check out my featured channels list. There's my buddy Hexen GT. His channel's really good, and I just started a sim racing channel that it's going to be a while before I build it up. It's probably going to be next summer before I really get it going. But I'm definitely starting to work on that. He says, I understand the need for a PPQB because our PP sucked last year, but I cannot see TDA playing night after night unless one of two things happen. Pesci is traded or they run with 7 D-men, and he only plays the power play with the odd shift on the wing of the fourth line. I think that is more likely at this point. Honestly, might not be a bad plan. So that's actually an incredibly good point. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And I replied to you that, considering the amount of time he spends in the offensive zone, below the goal line and on the rush and everything, this is just my perspective from me playing as an amateur. I feel like it's easier to take a defenseman and turn him into a forward than it is to take a forward and turn him into a defenseman. So, for example, and of which 3 of the guys I'm about to mention have been on the Hurricanes, one of them currently, you probably already know who that is. For example, Brendan Smith, he came into the league as a defenseman, and part of the way that he was able to save his career was taking up shifts as a forward. That may have saved his career. That probably kept him from getting sent down to the minors for good or having to go overseas to play. I really think that he saved his own career by adapting to that. Matt Tennyson, that used to play for the Hurricanes, defenseman, but very frequently had to play forward, but we really sucked back then. And then you have Brent Burns, who went in the other direction of being a forward who transitioned full-time eventually to being a defenseman, even though for a long time when he was in Minnesota, he did bounce between the two. I don't think he went to defense full-time until he was in San Jose. So I do have a video that overall discusses this topic, but the way I see it with how dynamic players are expected to be now, there's certain types of players that you're starting to see go away. The enforcer is gone. I think that you're going to see fighting more in a few years. I think you're going to see fighting more often in baseball than you do in hockey. I'm dead serious. Now, it needs to always be part of the game, but it's become a skill-first game. For example, think of someone in this era who does do a lot of fighting. For example, I'll use Austin Watson as an example. If you dropped Austin Watson into the 90s, he'd be one of the best players in the league. You can't afford to have much of anybody from your depth chart out for 5 minutes now, because then that's someone that's taking up double shifts, and that's someone that has twice the opportunity to make a mistake. You have to use all your depth now. And with everybody's expected to be a good skater, everybody's expected to have a good shot. Think of the absolute worst NHL player you possibly could and put him almost anywhere else, and he would dominate. So all these guys are good. And everybody in the league is skilled now. There's no more Chris Thorburns. There's no more John Scotts. I would say in 10 years or so, players like Tom Wilton are going to go by the wayside, even though he does have some upside as far as being able to score and everything like that, because everything's going to a skill-first game. So you have to bring something to the table in terms of contributing to scoring or preventing scoring, and you have to do that, exceptionally well, or you're not going to be playing in the National Hockey League now. It's just the way that it is. So I think that over the next few years, we're going to start seeing more and more people who can make the cut to get in the league, but they end up playing a different position just because of how dynamic and how well-rounded almost every player has to be now. So thank you guys very much for those comments as well. We got a couple more here. One more from D. Ely here. I really like this guy's comments. All right. It really doesn't matter if the Canes continue to play the umbrella like they did last year with zero change to a crappy PP. They left the first unit on for way too long, playing just passing the puck with zero net front. The guy down low on the side, the guy down low on the side of the net for a pass option makes no sense. You have to take away the goalie's eyes, or they will stop the puck 99% of the time. That's absolutely true, especially with how good all these goalies are now. They don't just play angles anymore, and it's not just pure athleticism anymore. They're all smart now. Any situation that you put them in, they've probably already seen it before, like a million times over. It's almost like their brain knows, like, it's like in Star Wars when someone is, like, blocking the blaster bolts with a lightsaber. That's what a lot of these goalies look like now. So you're absolutely right about that. That's why I don't think the scoring will ever get back to 80s levels, just because of how good the goalies are now. And to top off how good they are, their gear is really good now. Because back in the day, part of the reason you didn't have butterfly goalies is because the pads were not flexible at all. They sucked. Will they put TD on the power play with Burns? So far, that's been proven to not be the case. We'll talk about the power play units that they've been trying out in camp a little bit, even though it's probably not going to look a thing like that once the season starts. If they are thinking Burns on PP1 and TDA on PP2, why get him at all? PP2 only gets about 15 seconds at the end of the PP. Yeah, that's true, too. So I definitely think that they can change up the ice time distribution as far as the power play units go, because what they were doing last year, it was an improvement over the season before, especially in the playoffs, because when they were scoring on the power play in the playoffs, because the very first goal the Hurricanes scored against the Islanders was Aho on the power play. So there's been a little bit of improvement there, but it's definitely not where it needs to be. It is not a cup-winning power play. That is for damn sure. It definitely goes back, and I left you a reply saying basically the same thing. Yeah, and so I've got your other part posted here. So yeah, essentially, I definitely agree with that, and I left you a little bit of a comment when I looked at it the first time when I looked at it when you made the comment and everything like that. The power play, I definitely think it's more of a what is the issue as opposed to who is the issue. I think all the pieces for it to be good are there, but there's just going to have to be a little bit more. Whatever needs to be corrected with it is more of a systematic issue than it is a personnel issue, in my opinion. So we'll wait and see what they do to mend that and everything, but the good thing is they do have a lot of options. You have guys who, as far as who's going to work the point and everything like that, you have guys who tend to contribute more through shot saturation, and you have guys who are more power shooters, guys who are likely to take those really crazy hard snapshots and those slap shots and drop a bunch of clap bombs from the point and just go and try and put it on net with as much mustard as possible and hope that it goes in. And then you have other guys like Tony who are a little bit more of a thread the needle type of power play quarterback. I definitely think maybe they need to try a little bit something different because, like they tried having Jordo in the bumper spot, I remember a couple of years ago, and that didn't work out very well a lot of the time. So, I mean, they definitely do need to do something different because whatever they're doing is not making sense, and it's just a vicious cycle of them literally cycling the puck and not putting low danger chances on net, which makes no sense because of how much the Hurricanes generate high danger chances, especially 5-on-5. And I remember one point in time they couldn't score on the power play, and the Hurricanes had a bunch of shorthanded goals in that time frame. So it's definitely a systematic issue. All the pieces are there to have a power play that's at least, around 20%, I would like to say. So let's get into the second part here. Also, the Canes have an opportunity to have 4 solid lines this year. Absolutely. Bunting, Aho, Turbo and Aho make each other better. Jarvis does nothing to make Aho better. So that... I left a reply to this as well. Respectfully, I disagree with that. I think Jarvis played incredibly well with Aho. Now, was it nearly as good as when Turbo was playing with Aho when he was playing really well? Absolutely not. In order to make that switch back, in my opinion, I think that you have to have Teravainen return to form, which I'm hoping that he's going to do this season. Jarvis makes Aho better in regards of his ability to go in there, and separate guys from the puck using body contact. Even though he's not the biggest guy, he's not the biggest guy, but he plays a big guy's game. So he definitely did help in that regard, and not to mention how good he is forechecking and everything like that. Now, if Teravainen returns to form, then he absolutely needs to be on Aho's wing. Necas, KK, and Svetch, most productive line last year, but only with KK at 2C. Must start with that line together. I really did like that line. The only reason I would be okay with breaking it up is if they try Necas at center. And that's not to take KK out of center, but, it's like you could basically have a 1A, 1B situation with Aho and Necas. Have Aho do a lot of the neutral zone and defensive zone draws and everything like that. Necas is a great guy to have already in the offensive zone, or at least on the offensive side of the red line for those face-offs and everything like that, and let Necas drive offense in ways that I think that he can do that we haven't even seen yet, but it's totally there. Martin Stahl fast best checking line in the NHL. It was like that. It was definitely one of the best ones. I don't know if it was number one, but it had to be close. Honestly, most checking lines are team's fourth line, but the Canes' fourth line last year was all centers, one rookie between two guys who played too many years. Nason Lemieux, Drury, Suzuki, Ponomarev, Jarvis. Was Drury held back by Stepan or Stasny? Or will Suzuki, who looks great, or Pono, the end of Chicago's AHL season, take that spot? Another option is to move Necas or Jarvis to center. Yeah, like I've said before, I'm definitely on board with moving Necas to center. I understand that Jarvis was drafted as a center as well. I don't think I would put him there at the NHL level. I like what he brings to the table as far as being on the wing, and this is coming from someone who I had my doubts about Jarvis at the beginning, and I have much less of those than I had now. That's why when they were kind of talking about maybe potentially trading him, I wasn't entirely against it. The more and more the season moved on, though, even though he went cold a little bit, I said, no, this guy's got a really good foundation to be a solid top six winger, so I wouldn't do that just yet. I am looking forward to the start of training camp to see what the line combos are. Walt Ruff and Corey Lavalette and all those guys were sharing line combinations on Twitter, and people were losing their minds about them and everything, but they're going to look completely different once the season starts. Now, another thing that I replied to when I replied... one of the things that I replied to with the comment here was I think Bunting was specifically targeted in free agency to be on Aho's wing. And that's actually my next video of what the Canes need from each player in 22-23, which is where I think all of your comments came from, two of those different videos. I would say they specifically got Bunting to be a guy to go in there and get to the dirty areas, retrieve pucks, and set Aho up in front of the net so that he's spending less time below the goal line, more time in the slot where he can generate more high-danger shots and everything like that. And it adds a little bit of sandpaper to that line, and it makes already a really lethal forecheck even better, adds energy, adds sandpaper. I really think that was one of the very specific reasons amongst the broader reasons for the Hurricanes going out and getting Bunting. I think that's where they see him fitting in the lineup personally. Then we got one more from you, D. This is in response to the Necas video as well. He is also learning how to play responsible defense. Yeah, he's definitely improved in that regard. I think he's improved drastically in that regard. And like me and others have said on here with some of the other stuff that we've talked about and everything, I think that once Necas mends that disconnect between his brain and his body, he's going to be absolutely deadly. I'm hoping he gets tried out at center this year. I really think he can do it. I think he could be very impactful on top of all that. So we'll see what happens with that. Thank you guys so much for the comment. Now, another thing I want to address real quick while I'm looking. Another thing I want to address real quick here, and this is a good thing. I've noticed that there's a lot of good civil discourse with a bunch of critical thought, and guys are talking to each other in the comment section of these videos. I absolutely love that. Keep doing that. Let's keep talking about the game, and let's keep having fun. Let's keep having fun speculating about it. I occasionally get that troll who it's clearly like they just see the title of the video, they click on it, they watch the first 5 seconds of it, and they leave a comment saying, "Oh, but man, that's not a bit." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I already know what's going on here." But thank you guys very much for those comments. I think we got a couple more here. So we got us a new subscriber, a new commenter here, Alex Thurber, 9800. Forgive me if I pronounce that incorrectly. Good stuff, man. I like the analysis. Glad you included a comparison to Jordan Stahl because this is on the Kokanami video that I recently put out. Glad you included a comparison to Jordan Stahl because that's exactly how I see KK as well. Maybe not a replacement for Jordo, but a Jordo-like kind of player with a higher offensive upside. KK's only gotten better and better in a Hurricanes uniform. Can't wait to see how much he can do with this reloaded team coming into 23-24. Needless to say, liked and subbed for the insight. Looking forward to your thoughts on Chatfield, too. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The thing that actually got me thinking about drawing the comparison with Kotkaniemi and Jordan Staal, when I dropped that Stadium Series sweater off at the eye to get sent off to get his name put on it, and me and the lady that I was dropping the sweater off to, and I'm filling out the card and everything, and my buddy Jeremy, he had a Stadium Series sweater too that he got Necas' name on, and we just get to kind of BSing about stuff. It's earlier on in the day. The game doesn't start for a few more hours, and I got to talking to her about, like, when it came to KK, I see kind of that Jordan Staal-esque game with a little bit more of a scoring touch, and I hadn't even had that thought yet. It's just her and I got to talking, and then it just kind of popped in my brain, and I said it to her, and she said, you know what, that makes absolute sense, because, you know, big, physical, uses a lot of reach and everything like that, very responsible defensively and everything. So I definitely think that that's a pretty solid assessment of it and everything there. So thank you very much for subscribing, and keep leaving comments and everything like that. I really appreciate it. So the next one is from Jeremy's Point of View. He says, enjoying the content. Thank you very much. And I'm going to try to start making more stuff. It's just I've been really busy with, like, real life stuff lately, so I haven't had time to do all the things that I've really wanted to do with this channel, because I've got so many things I'm working on. I just don't want to shell them out one right after the other. I want everything here to be, you know, relatively good and streamlined and everything like that. I just don't want to shove a bunch of content out there, because that's how I would start making more mistakes and not making stuff as well as I would like for it to. So thank you very much. I think we got one more here that a guy got in right before I started recording the show, so I'm going to clip that one and get it in here too. Alrighty, so Nicholas Stewart had the first comment tonight, and he'll have the last one. And he says, and this is the Chatfield video I put out earlier today, he says, I think Chatfield has such a great skill set for us, but with the depth we have and the fact that people say Brett and Shea are staying this year, where would he even slot in? Because you would have to play Tony D too, right? I'm confused on what the Canes are going to do, but I trust Raw. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm wondering if they just stocked up on defense since they don't have a farm team right now, or if there were plans to trade Pesci and Shea and it fell through. I would absolutely hate to see Chatfield get moved, because I feel like it would be like, so when Calvin DeHaan signed with the Hurricanes the first time, they had to trade him to Chicago to kind of help clear up the logjam and everything like that, and Waddell said he really hated to trade him. I hope that this is not shaping up to be that. We could see a trade similar to how Justin Falk was traded that moves Pesci or Shea out. I think that Chatfield's capability to play his offside, you put him on the same pair as Tony DAngelo so that you don't break up the top four, but then you still have Orlov and Shea both that are kind of making a logjam there. So I'm not entirely sure what they're planning, but I'm sure that something is going to get done before it's over. Above all those defensemen, they give you some really good trade capital, but I'm not entirely sure what they're doing with that yet. Like, your guess is as good as mine on that one. I appreciate the comment, but we're going to have to wrap this up here. Alright guys, so that's going to be it for this show. I just wanted to get a mailbag in since I hadn't been doing it lately. Tomorrow I'm going to talk some more preseason stuff that I wanted to talk to at the end of this show, but it already got kind of long, so I'm planning on putting that out tomorrow along with the bunting video sometime within the next 2-3 days. Thank you very much for all the comments, all the support and everything. If you like this video, please hit like, comment, subscribe, share it, all that good stuff. Please consider donating to my Buy Me a Coffee, link in the description. Y'all take care, and I will see you next time.